The survival assessment chamber of the Galactic Naval Academy felt more like a diplomatic summit than a classroom. Rows of seats curve around the circular hall, each one occupied by a cadet from a different corner of known space. Scales shimmered under the lights. Chitin clicked softly, bioluminescent skin pulsing slow, thoughtful rhythms. 17 species, all brought together under one banner, all trained to survive the most hostile environments the galaxy could offer. At the center platform stood Commander Xylo. The Cryan officer's slate-gray skin bore the faint ridges of age and experience, and his forearms rested calmly behind his back. Multiple eyes swept across the hall, lingering briefly on each cadet. When he spoke, his translator rendered his voice into precise, emotionless standard. Today's evaluation is simple in structure, but absolute in consequence, Xylo announced. You will be presented with an unknown substance. Your task is to determine whether it is safe for biological consumption. A faint ripple of tension passed through the room. Lieutenant Jake Morrison of Earth sat near the center row. His posture relaxed to the point of looking almost bored. 6 months into humanity's integration into interstellar command, his presence still drew glances. Humans were newcomers, young, untested, and poorly understood. Beside him sat KDRRK, an insectoid VRN with segmented limbs and sharp mandibles that clicked softly in anticipation. This is easy, KDRRK muttered through his translator. Unknown liquids are always poison. Jake smirked but said nothing. With a quiet hum, sealed containers materialized on each cadet's desk. Clear, colorless liquids sloshed gently inside, catching the light. No markings. No warnings. Immediately, the room erupted into controlled activity. Scanning arrays unfolded. Chemical analyzers extended on jointed arms. The Delphinian cadets leaned forward, sensory tendrils quivering as they tasted microscopic traces in air. Morphidians cycled through forms, each shape designed to detect different threats. Jake picked up his container and gave it a casual swirl. Across the hall, Commander Xylo noticed. Morrison, the commander, said sharply, "This is not a guessing exercise. Use your issued equipment." "Just establishing a baseline, sir," Jake replied calmly. He activated his standard scanner. The device vibrated softly, projecting a dense stream of molecular data across its screen. Jake's expression changed, not alarmed, but thoughtful. Around him, other cadets began reaching similar conclusions. KTRRK's antennae sagged. Analysis complete. Compound identified. Cyanide derivative, fatal to 94% of known sapient species. One by one, cadets carefully sealed their containers and placed them into biohazard receptacles. The air filled with relief. Quiet pride at a threat successfully identified. Jake didn't move. He stared at the data, cross-referencing it with files only he seemed to have access to. "What is amusing you, human?" asked Seraph, a Luminoran whose glowing skin shifted to a curious violet. "This substance would kill us." Jake tilted his head. "The dosage." Commander Xylo stepped closer. "Explain." "The concentration is low," Jake said. "About 45 parts per million." The room stilled. "That is still lethal," Seraph insisted. "For most of you," Jake replied. "Absolutely." Commander Xylo folded two of his arms behind his back. "And for humans?" Jake stood, holding up the container. "On Earth, cyanide isn't just a poison. It exists naturally in foods we've eaten for thousands of years. Almonds, cassava, apple seeds, legumes. Our bodies adapted." The cadets stared. "Our liver produces an enzyme called rhodinase," Jake continued. "It converts cyanide into thiocyanate, which we excrete safely, provided the dose stays below a certain threshold." KTRRK's translator crackled. "You consume poison regularly?" Jake shrugged. "Not intentionally. But survival doesn't wait for perfect conditions." Commander Xylo studied him carefully. "Theory is one thing. Practice is another. Are you claiming you could ingest that liquid without harm?" Jake met the commander's gaze. He understood the moment. This wasn't about chemistry. It was about resolve. "I'm not claiming, sir," he said. "I'm demonstrating." Before anyone could intervene, Jake raised a container and drank. Not a sip. He swallowed half of it in steady gulps, then lowered the container with a quiet exhale. Could be colder, he added casually. Chaos erupted. Seraph's skin flared brilliant white. KDRRK lurched forward, mandibles snapping in alarm. Medical officers flooded the floor, scanners already active. Morrison, Commander Xylo barked. Report to medical immediately. Jake complied, though he walked under his own power. Vitals are normal, sir. The scan confirmed it. Heart rate steady. Blood chemistry stable. Enzymatic activity already breaking the cyanide down into harmless byproducts. Dr. Van, the crystalline head physician, recalibrated his scanner twice. This is statistically impossible, he said. That dosage would incapacitate even toxin-resistant species. Jake leaned back on the medical bench. Earth's not exactly forgiving. Commander Xylo watched silently. Later that night, word spread through the academy like a supernova burst. By evening meal, Jake was surrounded by cadets asking what else humans could endure. But the real test had already begun. A message blinked onto Jake's datapad as he lay staring at the stars beyond his quarters. Report to advanced combat training. Human limits require further evaluation. Jake smiled. The galaxy had just taken its first real sip of what humanity could survive. By the next rotation cycle, Jake Morrison was no longer just a human cadet. He was a rumor. Whispers followed him through the academy corridors, passing clicking mandibles, harmonic light pulses, and subvocal frequencies beyond human hearing. Stories changed with every retelling. Some claimed he drank the entire container. Others insisted the poison should have liquefied his organs. One particularly dramatic version suggested he had asked for seconds. Jake ignored most of it. Advanced Combat Training Hall 7 was massive even by interspecies standards. The ceiling arched high enough to accommodate aerial species, reinforced with gravitic dampeners and adaptive terrain panels. Entire landscapes would be simulated here. Lava fields, vacuum breaches, crushing ocean depths. Commander Xylo stood at the observation deck, watching as cadets assembled below. Human Morrison, Xylo said through the hall speakers, "Step forward." Jake did. A low murmur spread to the gathered trainees. Some leaned away instinctively, as though proximity itself was dangerous. Others watched with barely concealed fascination. Yesterday, Xylo began, you demonstrated an ability most species would classify as suicidal. Today, we determined whether that behavior was recklessness or capability. With a gesture, the floor shifted. Metal plates dissolved into jagged stone. Gravity fluctuated, pulling unevenly at bodies. Warning lights flashed amber. Scenario: hostile extraction under chemical assault. Xylo announced. Atmosphere compromised. Unknown toxins present. Your objective is to retrieve the asset and survive. A dozen sealed masks dropped from the ceiling. Most cadets grabbed theirs immediately. Jake did not. KDRRK scuttled closer, antennae twitching violently. You are not wearing protection. Jake glanced at the air quality display. Not yet. The simulation activated. A yellow-green haze rolled across the chamber, thick and acrid. Several cadets stumbled as their balance shifted under altered gravity. One reptilian species hissed in pain as the gas interacted with skin. Jake inhaled. Once. Slowly. KDRRK froze. Are you insane? Relax. Jake said, already moving forward. It's a sulfur-based irritant mixed with neurotoxic particulates. Nasty, but diluted. How can you know that without scanning? Shouted a quadruple cadet struggling to remain upright. Jake tapped his temple. Smell, taste, burn pattern in the lungs. He coughed once, controlled, then kept moving. Commander Xylo's eyes narrowed. Jake reached the simulated asset, a weighted core locked behind a fractured bulkhead, while others fumbled with tools through gloved hands. Jake braced his shoulder and slammed into the door. Pain flared. He gritted his teeth and hit it again. The metal buckled. He hauled the core free and turned, only to see KTRRK pinned beneath fallen debris, one limb sparking from damage. Go! KTRRK clicked urgently. You will not survive carrying both. Jake ignored him. He dropped the core, wedged his fingers beneath the slab, and lifted. Muscles screamed. His vision narrowed. Gravity surged. With a roar, Jake heaved the debris aside. KTRRK scrambled free, stunned. You could have completed the objective alone, the VRN said. Jake slung the core under one arm. Not how we do things. They moved together, coughing, stumbling, pushing through burning air until the simulation cut abruptly. Silence fell. The gas vanished. Gravity normalized. Terrain flattened. Commander Xylo descended from the observation deck. Slow and deliberate. You completed the objective, he said, with no fatalities, against optimal survival protocol. Jake shrugged. Protocols don't account for friends. Xylo turned to KTRK. Assessment. The VRN hesitated. Human behavior is inefficient, emotion-driven, illogical. A pause, but effective. Later, in the medical bay, Jake sat while sensors traced over bruises forming along his ribs. His oxygen levels were slightly elevated, stress hormones high, but nothing alarming. Dr. Van shook his crystalline head. Your species tolerates pain as a matter of routine. Jake smiled faintly. Pain means you're still alive. Commander Xylo observed from the doorway. Your world forged you through constant adversity. Predators, disease, environmental instability. Earth never gave us a break, Jake replied, so we stopped expecting one. Xylo stepped closer. You understand what this means. Other species will now recalibrate threat assessments. Humans will no longer be viewed as fragile. Jake met his gaze. Good. That night, Jake found his quarters door sealed with an official marker. Inside waited a sealed datapad, encrypted at command level. Subject: human adaptability. Status: under formal review. Attached were requests, classified simulations, combat endurance trials, and environmental stress tests no single cadet had ever been authorized to attempt. Jake exhaled slowly. Across the academy, eyes were turning toward Earth, not as a curiosity, but as a variable no one had planned for. And the galaxy was about to learn something important. Humans didn't just survive hostile environments. They thrived in them. The review status followed Jake Morrison like a gravitational anomaly. Doors opened faster when he approached. Conversations paused mid-sentence. Cadets from species that had once dismissed humans as physically unimpressive now watched him with cautious respect, or outright wariness. Being labeled an unknown variable in a military institution was never subtle. The next trial came without ceremony. Jake was summoned to Environmental Stress Chamber Theta, a restricted facility normally reserved for post-graduation special forces. The chamber could simulate planetary conditions considered non-viable for long-term operations. Commander Xylo stood beside a group of senior xenobiologists and tactical analysts. Cadet Morrison, Xylo said, today's evaluation will push your biological limits. You may terminate the test at any point. Jake nodded. Understood, sir. The chamber sealed. Temperature dropped instantly. Frost formed along the walls, crawling like living veins of ice. The air thinned, sharp and biting. Sensors registered sub-zero conditions approaching levels that caused cellular rupture in most oxygen-breathing species. Jake exhaled slowly, controlling his breathing. His muscles tightened, blood vessels constricting to preserve heat. Shivering began, not as panic, but as function. Outside, analysts murmured, he is not insulated. No thermal augmentation. Heart rate elevated but controlled. Minutes passed. The temperature fell further. Jake flexed his fingers, pain blooming as nerves protested. He focused on rhythm, inhale, exhale movement. His ancestors had crossed frozen land bridges with less. Then the heat surged. Without warning, the chamber reversed. Ice vaporized. Air thickened. Humidity climbed to oppressive levels. The heat slammed into him like a physical force. Jake staggered, sweat instantly pouring from his skin. Internal monitors spiked. Core temperature rising dangerously fast. He will overheat, a xenobiologist warned. Human cooling relies on evaporation. This humidity negates it. Jake ripped open his uniform collar, exposing skin. He slowed his movements, minimizing energy expenditure. Adapt. The word echoed in his mind. He dropped to one knee, reducing surface area exposed to circulating heat currents. His breathing became shallow, controlled. Minutes stretched. The chamber shifted again. Toxic particulates flooded the air, low-grade but cumulative. A compound designed to overwhelm respiratory systems slowly rather than instantly. Jake coughed. His vision blurred at the edges. Outside, Commander Xylo's claws flexed. Prepare to abort. Inside, Jake forced himself upright. His lungs burned. His body screamed for rest. But something else kicked in, old, primal, stubborn. Survive. Human physiology did not excel at any single extreme. It endured all of them. The chamber finally disengaged. Jake collapsed to one knee as medics rushed in, scanners flaring. His vitals were erratic, but stabilizing. Dr. Van stared at the readings. He should be unconscious. Jake looked up weakly. Still here. Commander Xylo studied him with something dangerously close to respect. Later, in the recovery ward, KDRRK stood at Jake's bedside, antennae twitching uneasily. They are afraid now, the VRN said. Of me? Jake asked. Of what you represent. Xylo entered quietly. Your species evolved under constant threat. You adapted not by specialization, but by tolerance. Pain, toxins, fatigue, heat, cold. Jake shifted slightly. Jack of all trades biology. Which makes you unpredictable in war, Xylo replied. Most species break when their optimal range is exceeded. Humans simply degrade. Slowly. The words hung heavy. That makes us good soldiers, Jake said. Xylo nodded. And dangerous enemies. News of the trials reached the Academy network within hours. Tactical forums lit up. Strategic models were revised. Simulations rerun. Humans were no longer classified as medium-risk allies. They were reclassified as environmentally persistent combatants. That evening, Jake received another message, this one marked with Joint Command authorization. Multi-species task force formation. Human representative required. He leaned back against his bunk, exhaustion settling deep into his bones. Earth had always been underestimated. Too chaotic, too violent, too young. But evolution didn't care about elegance. It rewarded what worked. And humans worked in places no one else could. As Jake closed his eyes, one thought surfaced, uninvited but undeniable. If this was how the Academy reacted to one human, what would happen when they met an entire unit? The formation of multi-species task force was not an honor. It was a warning. Jake understood at the moment he stepped into briefing chamber Aurelius, a room normally reserved for crisis simulations involving extinction-level events. The chamber was larger than most auditoriums, its walls alive with shifting holographic star maps and threat matrices. Around the central table sat officers and specialists who had not trained together by coincidence. They had been selected. Commander Xylo stood at the head, flanked by representatives from 5 military doctrines that rarely agreed on anything. Cadet Morrison, Xylo announced, you will serve as a human operational benchmark. Jake took his place, ignoring the subtle shifts as several species adjusted their posture, some leaning forward, others pulling back. The scenario activated. A frontier colony appeared in holographic detail. Fractured habitats, hostile terrain, collapsing atmosphere. Red indicators pulsed everywhere. Situation, Xylo said. Unknown machine-based hostile force. Environment unstable. Multiple toxins present. Standard extraction teams failed. A tall avian officer spoke first. Our unit succumbed to atmospheric corrosion within 12 minutes. A reptilian strategist followed. My species' armor protected us longer, but internal heat buildup proved fatal. All eyes turned, slowly, to Jake. What about humans? Someone asked. Xylo didn't answer. Instead, the simulation changed. The environment worsened. Gravity fluctuated violently. Visibility dropped. Toxic compounds layered atop one another. No single fatal element, but a cumulative nightmare. Jake studied the data silently. Your kind lacks natural armor, the avian officer noted. No toxin immunity. No exoskeleton. Jake nodded. True. Then why are you here? Jake leaned forward. Because we don't shut down when conditions stack against us. We slow. We suffer. But we keep moving. The simulation resumed, this time with Jake's biometrics overlaid. Human respiration adjusted. Liver enzymes ramped production. Pain threshold spiked under adrenal response. Muscle efficiency dropped, but not to zero. Minutes passed, then hours. The human unit, simulated but accurate, still functioned. Not efficiently, not cleanly, but functionally. The chamber was silent. Xylo finally spoke. Human doctrine does not seek ideal conditions. It accepts catastrophe as baseline. A murmur spread. Later, during live training, the theory became reality. The task force deployed into a derelict station, drifting near a volatile nebula. Radiation spikes battered hull plating. Internal gravity was inconsistent. Emergency lights flickered like dying stars. Jake led the advance team. KDRRK followed close behind, weapon raised. Sensors indicate structural collapse probability at 40%. Jake stepped over debris. Then we don't linger. They encountered resistance, autonomous machines scavenging power from the station itself. Precision fire dropped to instantly. A third detonated, releasing corrosive mist. Several cadets froze. Jake didn't. He charged through the cloud, coughing, eyes burning, and slammed his weapon into the machine's core. It collapsed in a shower of sparks. Behind him, the team surged forward. Afterward, in the debrief, damage assessments told the real story. Multiple species required medical intervention. Jake had chemical burns, internal inflammation, fractured ribs. He refused a stretcher. You are injured, Xylo said. Yeah, Jake replied, but still operational. That phrase spread faster than any report. Still operational. It appeared in tactical briefings, in threat assessments, in classified projections involving future conflicts. Humans were not the strongest. They were not the fastest. They were the ones who didn't stop. That night, Jake sat alone in the observation ring, watching the nebula churn outside the station windows. Colors clashed violently, beautiful and deadly in equal measure. Xylo joined him. You understand the consequence of this, the commander said. Other powers will take note. Jake nodded. They already are. You will be targeted, studied, tested. Jake smiled faintly. Story of our species. Xylo folded his arms. Your world forged you in chaos. But chaos does not always win wars. No, Jake agreed. But it teaches you how to fight when plans fall apart. A message chimed on Jake's datapad. Priority encrypted, external origin. Xylo glanced at the header. Human High Command, he said quietly. Jake opened it. The message was short. Prepare for first contact scenario. And no academic. Real-world deployment. Jake exhaled slowly. Training was over. The galaxy had finished testing humanity. Now it would see what humans did when survival wasn't theoretical. And somewhere, far beyond the academy walls, something hostile had just made a catastrophic mistake. It had assumed humans would break. The academy's simulation chambers had always smelled faintly sterile. Filtered air, regulated temperature, controlled danger. Real deployments smelled different. Burnt metal, ionized dust, fear. Jake felt at the moment the dropship pierced the upper atmosphere of Kepri 9, a marginal colony world, now flashing emergency signals across half the sector. From orbit, the planet looked wounded, scorch marks across continents, flickering energy signatures where cities should have been. This was not an exercise. The multi-species task force stood strapped into their seats, weapons magnet-locked, armor humming softly. No one spoke. Even species known for constant vocalization remained silent. Commander Xylo's voice came through the intercom. Intel confirms machine hostiles. Autonomous. Adaptive. No established communication protocol. Jake closed his eyes briefly. Machines that learned. Those were always the worst kind. The dropship shook as anti-air fire scraped along its shields. Warning lights flared, then steadied. Landing in 30 seconds, the pilot called. The hatch blew open to chaos. Wind screamed through shattered structures. Gravity fluctuated unpredictably, slamming Jake down 1 second and making his next step dangerously light. Smoke clogged the air, carrying metallic toxins and particulate ash. 2 cadets faltered instantly. Jake grabbed one by the harness and yanked him upright. Move or die. Your choice. They moved. The streets were a maze of wreckage. Machine constructs skittered across walls and ceilings, their movements unnatural, efficient. Energy bolts tore through cover like paper. Contact left. KDRRK clicked. Jake didn't wait for orders. He advanced. Shots clipped his armor, burning through plating, searing skin. Pain exploded across his side. He growled but kept moving. Humans didn't stop when hurt. They stopped when dead. Jake slid behind a collapsed transport, ripped a power cell free, and hurled it into a cluster of machines. The explosion tore them apart, showering the street in sparks. The task force surged forward behind him. They reached a civilian shelter. Cracked, failing, packed with survivors from half a dozen species. Life support systems were dying. We can't hold this position. An avian officer warned. Structural collapse imminent. Jake scanned the area. Then we don't hold it. We evacuate. That would require crossing open ground under fire. Jake nodded. Yeah. He keyed his comm on my mark. Smoke, then run. No one questioned him. The smoke deployed, thick and blinding. Jake sprinted first, drawing fire, taking hit after hit. Armor alarm screamed. Blood ran warm down his ribs. But the machines focused on him. One by one, civilians followed, shielded by the chaos. Jake collapsed only after the last transport lifted off. Medics surrounded him, scanners flashing wildly. Multiple fractures, organ trauma, toxic exposure beyond safe limits. Dr. Van reported remotely. He should be unconscious. Jake coughed. Busy. Hours later, aboard the command carrier, the debrief was silent. Footage replayed Jake's advance frame by frame. How he absorbed damage that would have killed others. How he kept moving even as his vitals crashed. Commander Xylo finally spoke. Human Morrison acted as a kinetic anchor, he said. The task force survived because the enemy focused on a target that refused to fall. The room understood the implication. Humans could be used as shock absorbers for reality itself. That night, Jake lay in a medical tank, suspended in nutrient gel, bones knitting slowly. Pain was distant, muffled. Xylo stood nearby. You will recover, the commander said. But the galaxy has learned something today. Jake's eyes flickered open. What's that, sir? That humans do not merely adapt to hostile worlds, Xylo replied. They weaponize them. Jake managed a tired smile. Outside the viewport, stars drifted past, cold, indifferent, endless. Somewhere among them, machine fleets recalculated threat parameters. Somewhere, enemy doctrines rewrote engagement rules. Because the era of dismissing humanity as fragile had ended the moment Jake Morrison refused to fall. And the galaxy was about to face a truth it could no longer ignore. A species born on a death world does not fear suffering. It expects it. And that expectation makes all the difference. Recovery took longer than command expected. Not because Jake's body couldn't heal, but because there was simply too much to repair. Inside the medical bay of the command carrier Aegis Horizon, Jake floated in regenerative suspension while nanofibers stitched muscle, reinforced microfractures, and filtered lingering toxins from his bloodstream. Machines hummed softly around him, monitoring vitals that dipped and surged like an unpredictable tide. Dr. Van reviewed the data for the 6th time. He is healing, the crystalline physician admitted, but the damage accumulation is unprecedented. Your species absorbs trauma rather than avoiding it. Commander Xylo stood nearby, arms folded. Humans call that endurance. Jake opened his eyes slowly. We call it surviving long enough to matter. Word of Kepri. 9 spread across interstellar channels faster than any official report could suppress. Footage leaked, edited, analyzed, replayed. A single human advancing under fire, taking hit after hit, refusing to collapse. Reactions varied. Some species were impressed. Others were deeply unsettled. Humanity's reputation shifted again, but this time not upward, sideways. Strategists began discussing humans not as soldiers, but as assets, living buffers, forward absorbers, units that could be sent where losses were inevitable. Jake felt that change immediately after being cleared for limited duty. The requests started coming in. Quiet at first, then increasingly direct. Human presence requested for hazardous breach. Human operative recommended for prolonged exposure zone. Human casualty tolerance exceeds acceptable margins. Jake read the last line twice. Casualty tolerance. Kate RRK found him staring at the datapad in the mess hall. They want to use you, the VRN said bluntly. Jake didn't deny it. They always were going to. Commander Xylo summoned Jake later that cycle. The Council debates your role, Xylo said. Some believe humans should lead. Others believe humans should be expended. Jake met his gaze steadily. And you? I believe unchecked resilience becomes exploitation, Xylo replied. Even strength has limits. The next deployment proved his point. A mining station had gone dark inside a radiation-heavy asteroid belt. No species could remain operational there longer than minutes. Humans, apparently, could last longer. Jake was assigned lead insertion. Inside the station, radiation gnawed at his cells despite shielding. His vision swam. His skin burned beneath the suit. But he kept moving. He found survivors. He got them out. He collapsed afterward, unconscious for 12 hours. When he woke, Commander Xylo was waiting. That was unnecessary, Xylo said quietly. They'd be dead otherwise. Jake replied. Yes, Xylo agreed. And next time they will send 2 humans. Then 10. Then 100. The words hit harder than any impact. Jake stared at the ceiling long after Xylo left. Earth history flooded his mind. Soldiers thrown into impossible conditions because they could endure them, not because they should. The galaxy was repeating an old mistake. Jake called home. The delay was long. Space was vast. A familiar voice finally answered. You look like hell, his sister said. Jake laughed weakly. You should see the other guy. She listened as he explained not the missions, but the expectation. The quiet assumption that humans existed to suffer so others wouldn't. You don't owe them that, she said firmly. Survival isn't a duty, it's a trait. Jake closed his eyes. That night, he sent a message to Commander Xylo in Joint Command. Human Operations Directive, revision required. Humans are not expendable resources. The response was not immediate. Debate erupted. Political pressure mounted. Some species accused humans of arrogance. Others admitted unease at how quickly they'd begun relying on human pain. Then something unexpected happened. Other human cadets spoke up. So did veterans. So did Earth itself. Humanity had survived predators, plagues, famine, and war, but had learned one lesson the hard way. Endurance without boundaries becomes self-destruction. Commander Xylo stood before the council days later. Humans are resilient, he said. Yes, but resilience is not permission. It is a responsibility. The council voted. Human deployment protocols were rewritten. No more sacrificial assumptions. No more silent exploitation. Jake returned to duty, not as a shield, but as a soldier among equals. Still dangerous. Still adaptable, but finally understood. As the Aegis Horizon set course for its next mission, Jake stood at the viewport, scars healing, resolve solidifying. Humans would survive, but they would not do so quietly, endlessly, or for free. And the galaxy was learning something far more important than how tough humans were. They were tough enough to say no. The galaxy did not change overnight, but it did hesitate. For the first time since humanity's arrival on the interstellar stage, war planners, diplomats, and admirals paused before finalizing their projections. Human endurance was no longer treated as an infinite resource. It had become something far more dangerous to underestimate, a conscious choice. Jake Morrison felt the shift in subtle ways. Briefings became discussions rather than directives. Risk assessments included human psychological limits alongside biological tolerances. And for the first time, alien officers asked a question that had never appeared in earlier reports. What do the humans think? The answer mattered. The next crisis arrived 6 weeks later. A machine-controlled fortress world drifted near a populated trade corridor, its gravity while destabilizing surrounding space. Any delay risked collapse, pulling civilian traffic into a lethal cascade. Standard doctrine demanded immediate assault. Standard doctrine also predicted catastrophic losses. The council convened an emergency session. Commander Xylo stood at the center of the chamber. We require a force capable of operating under layered environmental failure, prolonged combat, and adaptive enemy resistance. Several representatives glanced toward Jake, standing silently behind the human delegation. Xylo did not. Instead, he spoke the words that marked a permanent change. We require volunteers. Jake stepped forward anyway. So, do we? Came voices behind him. Not one, not 10, an entire human unit. Men and women shaped by Earth's gravity, scars visible even beneath uniform plating. Veterans, cadets, survivors. They stood without bravado, without spectacle. Commander Xylo inclined his head. You understand the risk. Jake nodded. We always do. The assault on the fortress world was unlike anything the galaxy had witnessed. Human units moved through collapsing corridors, fighting machines that adapted in seconds. Gravity inverted. Atmosphere ignited. Radiation storms flared and faded. Humans bled. Humans screamed. Humans kept moving. But this time they were not alone. Other species followed. Because humans showed it was possible to advance even when fear said stop. Because endurance, when chosen, became contagious. The fortress fell, not because humans were unbreakable, but because they refused to quit together. In the aftermath, Jake stood amid the wreckage, helmet cracked, breathing hard. KTRRK limped beside him, armor scorched but intact. You should be dead, the VRN said, clicking softly. Jake laughed, still operational. KTRRK paused. No, still deciding. The distinction mattered. Back at the academy, now transformed into a joint command nexus, new doctrine was written. Humanity was no longer labeled a death world species. It was classified as something far rarer, adaptive equals. Commander Xylo addressed the graduating cadets weeks later. Strength is not immunity to pain, he said. It is the wisdom to endure without losing oneself. His gaze settled briefly on Jake. Jake watched the hall, once filled with doubt, now alive with shared respect. Humans and non-humans alike, no longer divided by biology, but united by choice. That night, Jake returned to his quarters and looked out at the stars. Earth was far away, still dangerous, still chaotic, still trying to kill its children in small, inventive ways. And yet, it had taught them everything they needed to survive out here. Not how to be fearless, but how to act despite fear. His data pad chimed one final time. From Galactic Council. Subject: humanity's formal status. Jake opened it. Humanity is hereby recognized as a strategic equal among interstellar powers, not for resilience alone, but for restraint. Jake smiled softly. Survivors didn't just endure. They learned. They adapted. And when the time came, they chose who they would be. The galaxy had tested humanity with poison, fire, vacuum, and war. Humanity's answer was simple. We're still here,